Whenever an artist creates a detail, he leaves something of himself in his work of art. It's the human factor. We want to preserve and carry on. On March 24th of this year, 2020, the ELEVENTET celebrated its 40th birthday. I'd love to say that we played steadily for all those 40 years, but in the years we didn't play, I was always writing and planning. Now here's a list of basically all the players who have ever played with the ELEVENTET. This list is loaded. I've always been very fortunate. The ELEVENTET's journey took place primarily in 4 different locations. And it started in Boston. I moved to Boston in the mid-70s from Canada. I'm from Montreal. And I had moved to Boston principally to go to Berklee College of Music. And I went there for 5 semesters. Then I applied to teach at Berklee, and I got the job. And I taught there for the next 5 years. During all my time studying and teaching, I led 3 big bands. And I decided finally, because I wanted to do this on a regular basis, that I would cut down the instrumentation, and the ELEVENTET was born. The first concert took place in 1980, and here you see the cover of the actual program. Now, here I am as a young band leader in Boston. The 1970s and 80s. So for 2 or 3 years, the ELEVENTET played a bunch of gigs in Boston. Eventually, I got a job teaching up in Maine at Colby College, so I shot up there. Now, Colby College is about 3 hours north of Boston, so I figured if I was going to be up in Maine, I want to keep the ELEVENTET going. So I brought some of the cats up from Boston, and we did ELEVENTET concerts in Maine. So that kept the vibe going and kept me writing. And here you see the advertisement for the program, and you'll notice, because I was booking all the jazz acts on campus, I also booked George Garzone and the Fringe up there. And here I am, but now I'm in Maine. After a couple of years, in 1989, I decided to move to Philadelphia. And now the story of the ELEVENTET moves fast and furious up to the present day. When I got to Philly, a friend of mine in New York City told me he was going to get some musicians together to run down my charts. So the first activity for the ELEVENTET after my move was in New York City with a rehearsal band. And I would go back and forth from Philly to New York in 1991 and 92. I'd love to say we did some gigs, but this was a very important time for me too, because I heard my music and I kept writing a ton. This spurred me on to wanting something regular, once and for all. I was staying in Philly, so I set about planning. Now I got a job teaching at Ursinus College, which is northwest of Philly, and here I am when I started teaching. Now at Ursinus, I had a budget and I could hire a lot of acts, among them a lot of jazz. And of course I decided to bring the ELEVENTET to Ursinus, and it turned out to be one of the greatest concerts I've ever done. And take a look at this band. This lineup was stacked. It was recorded, and I finally released a couple of tracks from it on one of the 2 latest albums. I started planning for the ELEVENTET in Philadelphia, and in about 2005, I think I got the first group of players together, and by 2006, we did some rehearsals, and things took off. Our first gigs were at universities, and I didn't really have a permanent lineup, but I had some great friends helping me, from Philly and elsewhere. I did a concert at the Prince Music Theater. It was fantastic. Seamus Blake, Tim Higgins, Dick Oates, and there's a young Mark Allen, and we were off and running. And then I put another group together and decided to record, finally, a first album for the ELEVENTET. Here are my good friends Tim Higgins again, George Garzone, and Dick Oates. Here I am with the sax section, Dan Monahan and Tom Lawton in the rhythm section. And now here's a photo of the whole band. And you can see that I've got a few of the players who are going to be in the regular Philly band once I finalized all the details. And here's the album that came out of that. I got reviews all over the country, and I was ecstatic. You can see here that the album was one of the notable releases of the year in the New York City Jazz Record. Now, later in 2011, we played at the World Cafe Live in Philadelphia, and that was the only time that Terrell Stafford played with us, and it was a really good evening. Also, in the previous year, I had started our regular series of performances at Plays and Players Theater in Center City, Philly, and we've been there ever since. The first band that played there fairly regularly, 9 of the players were regulars, although Sam Greenfield played a lot, and primarily James Moore and Josh Lawrence played the solo trumpet chair. And you see here some photos from different performances at Plays and Players and at the Adrian Theater, where we played a few gigs for a while. Now eventually, in about late 2013, Chris Farr on tenor saxophone and Tony DeSantis on trumpet joined the band, and this band became the longest-running version of the 11th to date. And this band has a special place in my heart. We stayed together for the better part of 5 years, and we did 2 albums also. Crazy in Philly, which was recorded live in performance at Plays and Players, and here you can see us doing that. And then we went into the studio to do another album called Please Call, and here you see us in the studio. Right after those albums, Eric Johnson decided to leave the band, and Connor Salzer joined on drums, and Andrew Urbina had come into the band on alto saxophone. And then eventually, Chris Lewis started playing tenor saxophone, and we'd have a few subs in the band, and then I settled on a regular personnel, which didn't last quite so long as the previous band this time, but was nonetheless a fantastic band. After about 18 months, Chris Lewis left for the West Coast, and Dylan Band joined the band on tenor saxophone, and Andrew Connors came in on lead trumpet. Mark Allen has always been the baritone saxophone player in the band. Randy Kapralik and Jared Antonacci have been the fantastic trombone section for years. Sandy Eldred has been our regular bass player for over 10 years, and Tom Lawton has played a ton of gigs on piano. And that's the current personnel. During all this activity, my good friend Bogdan Humenyuk invited me to Ukraine, where I performed some 11th charts with some of the best musicians in that country. It was a great concert in Kiev, and I also gave 3 master classes. What a fantastic time. The current 11th has played a bunch of gigs already. Here you can see part of the band at South Jazz Club. And just this year, we recorded our 2 latest albums, Continuing Action and On Point. Now, unfortunately, in this year of the pandemic, we never got to celebrate our official 40th birthday concert and to release the 2 CDs in that concert. And that's the story of the 11th to this point. And now in the next part of the Intergalactic Holiday Special 2020, you're going to see and hear us in the studio recording the album On Point. Well, here we are in the studio recording the album On Point. We had gone into the studio earlier this year, in January 2020, to do this full studio album. And also, I recorded an extra piece, a large 3-movement suite, for which I added vibraphone and guitar, and that was on the second album called Continuing Action, which was really a compendium of performances or parts of performances from the past 19 years. But this album was the full studio album, and I was really excited about doing this. The 5th 11th album. It featured a lot of new charts, a couple of standard arrangements, and you'll hear that the band is really on fire in this. This is a chart called Light Song. on an album, we'll rehearse maybe once if we're lucky, and then we go in and hit it in the studio. On this chart, I featured tenor saxophone and trumpet. And in a few seconds, you'll hear a hip trumpet solo by Tony DeSantis. I really love the interplay in the band here, sort of the call and response. And there's Tom Lawton with the perfect comping. Yeah, Tony tore that apart. And it's on a nice tune. I like the mood on this tune. It was one of the more introspective tunes on the album, and the band was really sensitive on it. There's faster swing and other moods on this album, but I really like the way this chart turned out, and you can hear it now in the ensemble passage. Now here's another composition called Necessity, which opens up the album. Now this chart had been in the book for the longest time. It is the oldest chart that we did on this album. We've been playing this on and off for the past several years, although this particular personnel might have only played it once or twice previously. But you wouldn't know that. We've been together for a while, and these players make it work. You're going to hear a pretty hot tenor saxophone solo by Dylan Band. Yeah, Dylan is one of the more recent members of the band. He came in a little over 2 years ago. We dug playing this chart a lot. There's a lot of energy in it, and the ensemble passage is strong. The saxophones and the brass. I couldn't be happier. World-class horns. Here's Tom Lawton playing piano. Tom is a great friend of mine, and anytime I could get him on any project over the last 30 years, I jumped at it. So here's Tom on his solo, and he pretty much crushes it, as expected. Drums, Sandy on bass, super solid. So now we take the tune out. The band is really together on this, and there's so much energy. really a successful session for us. And we had 2 new albums come out this year. Unfortunately, the pandemic prevented us from really celebrating the release of the 2 new albums, but they've been doing well online. And I'm happy. And we'll go forward from here. And now, a few words from our sponsors. Achy tooth? No problem. Try Tooth Popper. First, bring the contraption close to your achy tooth. Second, smile wide. Third, let the Tooth Popper punch you right in the smacker. Out pops the correct tooth, 50% of the time. Are you trying to quit smoking? Try now or never. A cigarette designed to give you the ultimate near-death experience. With just 1 or 2 inhales, you'll instantly slip into a 24-hour coma. When you wake up, your urge to smoke will be completely gone. Guaranteed. I'll tell you a secret. Seductive, tempting, and irresistibly smooth. Only a chocolate this pure could last this long on my lips. Savor the taste of Raoul's Salted Caramel Swirl.